9-0, baby. Guys, welcome to another huge episode of Triggered. So much to get into tonight, obviously. A huge win today at the Supreme Court, but it's just one step in defeating all of this insane lawfare once and for all. We've witnessed a literal attack on democracy, not from the people who've been talking about that, but the people who've been making it up all along. But the insanity in New York isn't slowing down. I'll give you my full reaction to the Supreme Court as well as to what they're doing and further trying to do to Alan Weisselberg. And just now, and how awful it really is. What they're really trying to do, because honestly, they don't care. We're living in a banana republic, folks, and they continue to prove it each and every day. I also think my father had one of the best moments, really, reacting to the Supreme Court ruling today. I'm actually going to play a little clip, in this intro, but I'm going to play the whole thing actually at the end of the show. I think it's important for you guys to see that. I want to also get your guys' reaction to it. It's Trump in front of the press, no teleprompters, no podium, no bullet points, off the cuff. I think it was for like 15 or 20 minutes. I was watching at the time. I was like, wow, it's actually really good. And that's also like when you realize like he can do that, but the president of the United States is so incompetent, he can barely stand up on his own. When he walks, it's like he's got a full diaper. It's really ridiculous. But I actually thought it was really that compare and contrast. I mean, it's what I loved in 2015 when it was just Trump impromptu. Once you have a whole operation, things get so much more curated and everything. I was like, this is why people love him. This is why he gets it. He calls out Joe Biden. Let's do this one-on-one. Let's not do it through the weaponization of our government, et cetera. But we'll get into that in a little bit. We'll also be joined by the chair of the House Republican Conference, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. She's got major developments and multiple investigations. We'll be talking about that, the Biden crime family, the anti-Semitism crisis on college campuses, that she was really the person, I think she was probably the best catalyst of all of that. We saw what was going on, but she's the person that called it out and called them out, including the president of my alma mater, Penn, and Harvard, and whatever, in front of Congress. People finally saw just how insane these institutions had become. So make sure you guys are liking, sharing, subscribing so you never miss any one of these episodes. Also, if you get your podcast perhaps in different ways, if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or know people who would do it that way, we put them on there after they air here on Rumble, so you can make sure you're sharing that messaging with others, especially if you know that's how they get it, or perhaps that's how you get your podcast, so you don't ever miss anything. So for all of the top headlines we'll cover in there, so also you can head over to MXM News, like MXM Minute by Minute News, where you can get the mainstream news without the bias, an app that I created with some friends, just to make sure you could see that. Not what Google's going to give you, certainly not what Gemini is going to generate in their AI program, but we all understand how badly we've been manipulated by search and big tech. I want people to be able to see all of it. So they tell you to build your own. We do just that. So go check out MXN News. And with that, guys, let's get into the top stories of the day. Today, the Supreme Court gave a 9-0 unanimous smackdown to leftist attempts to interfere in the 2024 election. The 14th Amendment does not disqualify my father from the presidential ballot. This was always an insane argument. It was so insane that Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson, not exactly conservatives, not even close, agreed with the conservative majority on the court. The ruling has caused the left to go insane. Keith Olbermann, kind of a whack job to begin with, but he's now accusing Ketanji Brown Jackson, apparently, of not being able to read. I mean, seems kind of racist, seems really chauvinistic with what he says about the other members of the court, but he tweeted, "The Supreme Court has betrayed democracy. Its members, including Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor, have proved themselves inept at reading comprehension. And collectively, the court has shown itself to be corrupt and illegitimate. It must be dissolved." I mean, listen, I may not agree with their political views, But I imagine their reading comprehensions, okay, I think they may get selective about some of these things, like when it comes to the Second Amendment, etc. But, this one seems kind of clear. It also seems like the people of the Supreme Court may agree that maybe, just maybe, my father, with his very clear words, wasn't exactly an insurrectionist, striking another blow into some of the insane nonsense that they're trying to do with the lawfare here each and every day. Now, of course, this is coming from Keith Olbermann, and if you know anything about Olbermann, you'll know that attacking women with vulgarities and sexism is right in his wheelhouse. Back when he was on MSDNC, he once called former Fox News contributor Michelle Malkin a, quote, big, mashed up bag of meat with lipstick on it. I mean, I guess only Olbermann could come up with something that ridiculous, but he has some pretty awful takes, often. And watching him melt down on Twitter is truly spectacular. He even once came under fire for attacking grandmothers during a tirade against the World Baseball Classic. He literally said, quote, the World Baseball Classic is a meaningless exhibition series designed to get you to buy another uniform and split up teammates based on their grandmothers, based on where their grandmothers got laid. Call it off now. This guy is completely insane. And that's, probably in par with most of the radical left today. Of course, the so-called real journalists, not that Keith Olbermann was ever one of those, but the real journalists and expert pundits who have a lower approval rating than long commutes to work, and for good reason, also had some special takes. Just look at how the Associated Press framed the Supreme Court's ruling. I quote, Supreme Court restores Trump to ballot, rejecting state attempts to hold him accountable for attack on Capitol in 2021. What? Did George Soros get a job as an AP reporter? That's from the AP, folks, okay? Which is supposed to be, one of the less biased of them all. Now, everything is relative today. In today's mainstream media, it's like, are you a 9 or a 10 on a 1 to 10 scale of just how much of a radical you are? They're supposed to be like a 9 as opposed to the 10, which is like CNN and MSDNC. But the American mainstream press is pathetic. They're literally functioning as the marketing department of today's radical left. You should never forget how the left's so-called experts told you that everyone agreed that the 14th Amendment disqualifies Trump from the ballot. Watch this little montage for yourself and see. Everyone agrees, folks. Everyone.
That, as Trump is saying, the president is somehow exempt from the 14th Amendment. The technical legal term for that argument is poppycock. I mean, that is just wrong every day of the week from what the framers understood at the time of the 14th Amendment.
Do you think that failing to remove Donald Trump from the ballot devalues the 14th Amendment?
It does, and it devalues the entire Constitution. If you read the Constitution and take it literally and historically and textually, you cannot escape the conclusion that he should be removed.
But her second major holding is not, and it has national implications. That is that the 14th Amendment bars a presidential candidate who engaged in insurrection. I think that's correct, and the majority of commentators agree with that reading.
Everyone agrees, folks. These people are insane. None of these left-wing lunatics will apologize for their bad takes or lose their TV hits or spots or shows, just like they didn't for pushing Russia collusion as though it was the gospel for 5 years. No. They get to keep their Pulitzer Prizes for the incredible reporting about something that proved to be a total lie. The same experts that told you that masking works are the same ones that told you that the 14th Amendment bars my father from the ballot. Just remember, folks, though, we got to keep paying attention to what they're doing. We understand how this court works. We understand how the media will pressure them. Okay, they have to rule on other things later, and they'll use this is the great example of that they're not biased at all and not pressured. So make sure you understand just that. So I'm not taking it for quite the win that it probably is, because I understand how politicized some of this has become. I understand these people live in D.C. We'll talk about those results shortly, and what that means and what that likely does. So, let's make sure we understand, keep an open eyes to this, that it's not like this is the proof that there's not bias there, and they're not easily influenced, because you got to talk about some of the other ones coming up when you talk about presidential immunity and some of the other cases going on. So, again, I love the win. 9-0 pretty strong. I just hope it's also not a setup for them to try to screw over the Constitution, my father, Republicans, and conservatives across the country in a couple months. So that's the cynical version. But I have to tell you guys that on this show, because you don't come for me just to give you the good news and only the good news. We got to talk about reality, and that's a big part of what's missing from most of the press and anyone talking about these things. But guys, remember, when it comes to liberals, everything is reversed. The experts don't know anything, and the protectors of democracy are actually attacking it. The Democrats are frauds. They want to make sure you cannot vote for the person you want to vote for the presidency of the United States of America, to save democracy, to save the republic. They'll never use save the republic, because the implications are different, obviously, than a democracy. But we're going to make sure you can't vote for who you want to save democracy. My father's response to today's ruling was actually perfect. It's time for Biden to stop the weaponization and start taking care of our country once and for all. The press cannot lie to the American people. They see the insanity each and every day. Check this out.
President Biden, number one, stop weaponization. Fight your fight yourself. Don't use prosecutors and judges to go after your opponent, to try and damage your opponent so you can win an election. Our country is much bigger than that. The other thing I say to President Biden, close the borders now. This is not sustainable for our country. It's not sustainable for our cities. Our country is under siege.
And guys, my father didn't stop there. He explained just how important this ruling is to avoid a complete and total collapse of our election system. Again, I'm always a little bit skeptical, only because I've lived in the real world. I understand how it works. Everything we've been told about our country has probably proven to be a lie, unfortunately. But at least people are waking up to it. But check this one out, because I thought it was really important.
Decision were very well crafted, and I think it will go a long way toward bringing our country together, which our country needs. And they worked long, they worked hard, and frankly, they worked very quickly on something that will be spoken about 100 years from now and 200 years from now. Extremely important. Essentially, you cannot take somebody out of a race because an opponent would like to have it that way.
Now, Biden's State of the Union is on Thursday, folks. NBC reported that he's going to ask the country, whose side are you on? Remember, the guy that talked about unity and then called half the country, essentially deplorables, like Hillary. That's what they do. That was the, crazy look with the red dystopian speech where he demonized and vilified half the country while talking about unity. It's not going to work. But America is not on Joe Biden's side, it seems. He can say what he wants. He can ask those questions. Big tech, the mainstream media can do their bidding. But America is clearly not on Joe's side. Polls came out this weekend from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CBS News, and even Fox News. They all showed the same thing. Joe Biden is losing in the general election, and the country absolutely hates his policies. Now, that won't stop them from playing the games, and the Democrats will do whatever they can, although it's getting so bad, honestly, I think they have a harder time doing their usual cheating and their games, because when they do it, I don't think anyone's going to believe it. And that's the true threat to democracy, folks. 69% of voters told the Wall Street Journal, again, not exactly conservative these days, that things going on in this country, they're going in the wrong direction. 69%. And over 60% of voters told Fox that they disagree with Joe Biden's handling of the economy, the border, inflation, China, and Israel. In other words, they disagree with literally everything that Joe Biden does, and everyone thinks that Joe Biden sucks, which is fair, because if you've been watching and you're not an imbecile, you would realize that for yourself. Except Joe Biden, expect him to lie during the State of the Union. That's what they do, because there's no one that's going to call him out other than me and maybe a couple other people on Rumble. He's going to lie about immigration. He will claim that the system is broken and that his hands are tied. That's a lie. Biden broke the system. He reversed the successful policies and didn't even bother to talk to his Border Patrol chief about just that. You can listen to the Border Patrol chief himself say it.
I've never had one conversation with the president or the vice president for that matter. And so I was the chief of the Border Patrol. I commanded 21,000 people. That's a problem.
Guys, Biden never called him because Joe Biden doesn't care about the border. He wants it to be open. All he had to do was keep Trump's policies in place. Just like liberals don't care about rising crime, they're fine with it. Your lives will be miserable while they'll be protected by bodyguards. A new study of so-called bail reform in New York showed that 70% of people released under bail reform were rearrested within 2 years. Will this cause Democrats to change their policies? Of course they won't. That's their voter base at this point. They understand that. They will vote for the people who treat them nicely and let them go so they can rob your families again and again and again. And finally, guys, Nikki Haley got herself a win. She got a win. It's actually one I'm happy to lose. And you don't hear Trump say that often. Nikki Haley is the queen of the swamp, and she won the D.C. Republican primary on Sunday. I'm surprised anyone even showed up in a D.C. Republican primary, but she should cherish this win because she's about to get demolished on Super Tuesday tomorrow. So if you're a voter and you're in a Super Tuesday state, make sure you go vote tomorrow. Send the message to send Nikki Haley back to whatever board seat, swamp position she's going to try to get herself on, whether it's Soros-funded or Reed Hastings or Hoffman or one of the other billionaire liberals, whoever the hell is funding her right now. That's what's going on. But remember, folks, the D.C. thing is problematic, but also very intentional. Remember, this is the jury pool that we're dealing with in Washington, D.C. Jack Smith, okay? And the Democrats aren't even pretending that they don't know that, and it's not 100% intentional. There was one very telling response to Haley's win that came from Democrat lawyer and hatchet man Mark Elias, who tweeted, "In a city of 700,000 people, Donald Trump got 676 votes in the GOP primary." A tough jury pool. See, he's not even pretending. They know a trial in D.C. is rigged. It's why they chose to do it there. It's why even the Florida case had a D.C. pool set up for the grand jury. And it has a predetermined collusion, which is what they were trying to do. The collusion was a conclusion, and they knew what it was going to be no matter what in Washington, D.C. Remember that as we go there. Remember also that Mark Elias is Hillary Clinton's lawyer and is the one who helped bankroll Fusion GPS and the Nonsense Steele dossier. And he's on a mission to undermine the integrity of our elections as much as possible. None of these radicals care about the law or justice. They want to destroy their political opponents. And in New York, the state attorney general's office and Manhattan district attorney have been doing everything they can to destroy the life of former Trump org CEO Alan Weisselberg. They threatened him with 15 years in jail again, on bogus perjury charges. And now he's going to plead guilty to 5 months in jail to make that go away because a 75-year-old guy isn't going to roll the dice with the rest of his life. So they get him to say that he lied on something that's pretty clear he didn't. And you know what? I get it. But that's the game. It's downright awful. And it's corrupt to the core. A statement from the Trump organization itself reads, in part, Alvin Bragg's decision to prosecute 76-year-old Alan Weiselberg for non-existent perjury offenses dating back to 2020 by threatening him with years in state prison while simultaneously turning a blind eye to the admitted and repeated perjury of their star witness, Michael Cohen, is the very definition of selective prosecution. Because of course it is, guys. That's what this was always about. Cohen perjured himself so many times, people can't even remember like how many times he's done it. And yet, that doesn't matter. He's the star witness, as long as it's against Trump. But someone from years ago that they knew, even then, why'd they wait till now? It's almost as if it's a plan. We'll get him to do that, and maybe we'll make the sentence a little lighter if he now, after years of not rolling on President Trump, does just that, or whatever their plan is. We understand that this is all political persecution. Plain and simple. Just like what's happening to Blaze journalist Steve Baker. He was just arrested for his reporting on January 6th, which was before he was even working at the Blaze. He's being charged with trespassing at the Capitol in disorderly conduct for reporting on the ground. Think about that. They're now arresting journalists in America. Oh, yeah, but Vladimir Putin. Remember, everything's Vladimir Putin. And like a week later, America. Bastion of freedom and democracy, yada, yada, yada. Quotes, nonsense. Like my eyes are rolling in the back of my head. Start doing exactly the same. What are we, 2-3 weeks behind where Russia is? Maybe a couple months at best. If Trump gets reelected, maybe we can slow that down for a couple of years. Are we kidding? Arresting journalists in America because, they don't like the narrative? Oh, yeah, this works out well, folks. I'm sure everything's fine. We're just protecting democracy or something. Again, whatever the soundbite is, they'll keep going with it and they'll keep making up more lies. The feds even perp-walked him in handcuffs. Why? Why now? Why, years later, would you prosecute a journalist for being present and doing the job that no actual journalists have done in America, like report the truth or what actually happened on the ground? Baker said in a statement, if you don't say the right thing at the right time and comport to the right narrative, that's what they're going to do. It's wrong up here because I'm trying to read the quote, but it doesn't make any sense. But they're going to come after us, and that's exactly what happened. We're in dangerous and uncharted times, folks. This is what they're doing. Again, this is the stuff they scream about when it happens elsewhere in the world. And yet when it goes in America and it goes against a conservative or someone reporting truth rather than the nonsense we all know, again, I understand it was the first unarmed insurrection in the history of the world by probably the most heavily armed populace of the world. They're just magically, they've all forgot their guns, but no, it's an insurrection. Keep believing that. Crazy times, folks. And we'll get to Congressman Elise Stefanik in just a few moments. But first, a quick word from our sponsors who have the guts to support this show. That includes several new sponsors, including 1775 Coffee, which is brewed to perfection, crafted with precision, and built on patriotism. Their farm-to-cup process means that there is quality, authenticity, sustainable from start to finish. And guys, we talk about it all the time. Don't give your money to some woke coffee chain that hates your guts and will spend it against all the things you believe in. Give it to the companies that actually share your values. It's why 1775 Coffee is joining forces with Rumble to support the causes that matter most. Your purchase helps support veterans' causes, groups fighting to protect the First Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, and so much more. So go to 1775coffee.com/Don Jr. That's 1775coffee/DONJR for 10% off your first order and check them out. Also, we have a new sponsor right here from Rumble because I'm excited about this one. I'm excited to introduce you to Rumble Cloud Services, which will provide content creators and businesses with the products and services they need to succeed. Rumble has built the cloud for the parallel economy, so you don't have to worry about being canceled, all your information being deleted, just being told, hey, you're off Amazon Web Services or wherever you may be. You're not going to be censored by big tech giants and lose everything. And the Rumble Cloud pricing model will be lower. It'll lower your costs, it'll increase savings, and give you more predictable budgeting. Exclusive for friends of Rumble, Sign up today at friends.rumble.cloud and receive 30% off the first 3 months of your cloud subscription. Remember, guys, they say build your own, so we actually go do that. Don't keep supporting the companies that have been canceling you, censoring you, doing everything possible to make your life hell if you don't conform to their political whims. Go check this out. Friends.rumble.cloud. Get 30% off the first 3 months of your cloud subscription, and it'll be available for purchasing this spring. Rumble Cloud services are essential for any size business to innovate and grow. And like I said, it's an affordable service that is supported by independent infrastructure and not linked to big tech, so you won't get canceled by the woke mob. So again, head to friends.rumble.cloud and sign up today. And with that, joining me now, Congresswoman from New York's 21st District, Elise Stefanik. Elise, great to have you on with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be with you, Don. I enjoyed your opening, and boy, you hit on so many important issues, whether it was the Supreme Court unanimous decision today, or whether it's the weaponization of the government that Joe Biden is using, because Joe Biden's pollings continue to plummet every single day.
Yeah, well, let's break down all of those, obviously. I think we got to talk about, a bunch of them. I mean, were you surprised by the ruling from the Supreme Court today? The New York Times informed me that the 14th Amendment argument was airtight. I mean, it was clear. Now, you heard me sort of sarcastically talk about the first unarmed insurrection in the history of the world, and yet it clearly is. Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. I don't understand, but I don't have to these days because it doesn't matter. There's seemingly enough powerful forces to sort of create the truth rather than actually talk about what actually happened.
No, I was not surprised, Don. And I said a few weeks ago when CNN had a meltdown, I had the opportunity to go on CNN. I do not like going on CNN, but I thought it was important to talk about that this is weaponization and it's illegal. And I predicted this would be a 9-0 Supreme Court decision. And it was, because what the Democrats and the radical left are trying to do is they are attacking democracy. They want to take away the American people's right to make this decision at the ballot box. And whether it's the Colorado cases or other states in the country that are pursuing this illegitimate, illegal act and unconstitutional act, it was important. And I think President Trump's response was spot on after the Supreme Court decision that this is going to be an important case, an important precedent for the future of this country, not just important today, but protecting the American people, the Constitution, and who we are as Americans in our constitutional republic. So I was not surprised, but I'll tell you who was surprised: the chattering class and the mainstream media, who all say the same thing and parrot the talking points, whether they're from Nancy Pelosi or Mark Elias. So it was a good day for the Constitution and a good day for the American people, a bad day for mainstream media.
Okay, so you heard my opening intro, and I hate to do it because you'd love to just to have a win and be like, hey, it's a win, that's nice. I have to look at everything so cynically these days, only because I've been there enough to just not assume that anything is actually there. Do you think some of the 9-0 win is so that when you get to some of these other cases, they can get more politicized and be like, no, see, we were objective over there. But here it's I just see that happening where it's like, kind of protecting the sanctity of the court to be like, we're actually being objective. Now, this one's a big one, I guess, but like, I don't think anyone, who is, any real sense of it thought it was going anywhere. So do you think this is the way that they sort of try to, rake you over the coals later on something else?
No, and I understand why you can be cynical, especially what your family member, what your father has gone through, whether it was the Russia hoax, the years of that, the fact that Democrats tried to resist the will of the American people in the 2016 election, whether it was the rigged 2020 election. So I understand the trepidation and just the uncertainty and the potential cynicism, but I have faith in our Constitution, and it's going to be very important for the Supreme Court to stand up for the Constitution and frankly, to ensure that we have election integrity, which we did not have in 2020. And that was why on January 6th, I stood up for the Constitution. And those of us that have spoken out have been smeared by the media. We've been smeared by the cocktail class in DC, but we are going to continue to stand up. And I think what is most important is every single day, Joe Biden's poll numbers go down. President poll numbers continue to go up. We see he is in the strongest position when it comes to polling headed into the general election in every national poll this week. And you're seeing in his campaign and House Republicans in my job as conference chair, we're going to make sure that we are on message talking about the issues that matter to the American people, which of course is the border crisis, but also pushing back on this weaponization of the federal government against Democrats' political opponents.
So, yeah, I mean, talk about that a little bit in the sense that, like, you've actually gotten, very vocal these days, but far more, the last, year, you've gotten more assertive, more aggressive on some of these issues, and is it when they attack you personally, when they do the things that you do, when they tried smearing you for what I thought was one of the great sort of needed to happen conversations before Congress with the universities, when you're asking, hey, is calling for the death of a people and cheering on people who raped and murdered people, do you think that's a violation of Penn or Harvard or MIT's code of conduct? And all of a sudden, the left, who didn't seem to care about free speech at any other point in time, is like, no, it's free speech. I'm like, no, there's a difference between a code of conduct. You can't just do that. I can't, work at a company and go in and start screaming stuff at the top of my head and not expect to get fired. There's a difference. And it was the first time I've seen the left actually defend free speech in the history of, time, I guess, or at least time, post-Trump. But you've gotten much more vocal about these things and have become a great sort of actually, attack person on that. Tell me how you got there and how that, the attacks on you personally perhaps affected that.
Well, certainly this is something that your father, President Trump, feels more than anyone else in terms of the viciousness of the left and the attacks from the mainstream media. This goes back to impeachment hoax part one, impeachment sham part one, when I stood up for the Constitution and the American people and for what was right and called out Adam Schiff. I was smeared by the left. The entire Democrat ecosystem attacked me. They poured in millions and millions to try to defeat me in that election. And it really was an eye-opener about how this entire swamp deep state apparatus will target those that are standing up for what's right, standing up for the Constitution. So fast forward to today, because that was in 2018, this hearing with the university presidents. I graduated from Harvard. I know you graduated from Wharton, and I was very, very concerned about the lack of leadership of the former president now of Harvard University. And I encouraged the education chair to have this hearing to address the unacceptable rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses. And I'll tell you what, Don, my question was actually the last question of the hearing. There was no media in that portion of the hearing. And it was 3 minutes that the most junior freshman member yielded to me. I sit on top of the dais since I'm a more senior member and have been here for a decade. And I asked a simple question to each of the presidents, starting with MIT, then Penn, then Harvard. And that question was this: does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? And they epitomized the groupthink of the radical left, and they all answered, it depends on the context. You put up 3 hardworking constituents from my district, a farmer, a manufacturer, and a suburban mom. They know how to answer that question. It is a disgrace that the university presidents of what are supposed to be the most prestigious higher ed institutions failed. It is now the most viewed testimony in the history of the United States Congress, with over 1 billion views in a week, and it's now well into billions. More views than the famous Watergate hearings, certainly more views than the Pelosi January 6th phony committee that Liz Cheney, my predecessor, who I defeated, served on. And it's because it was long overdue, this reckoning and this earthquake that really that hearing set off. So we're in the midst of an investigation following up on that hearing, but I was proud to stand up for what's right and to really shine a light on what is wrong in higher ed and what is wrong in this radical left movement that we're seeing on college campuses and in society writ large.
Yeah, when I graduated from Penn, 20-something years ago, I'm pretty sure that if I'd have called for that on campus at the time, I'd have been removed. And that's before anything ever happened like that. People didn't wear politics on their sleeves. It wasn't a big thing on campus, even though it was obviously academic, therefore left-leaning. That was pretty clear. I sure as hell know that if I was a student there at Penn and I did something similar, I'd have been thrown out of my ass. If I went after the trans community at Penn, it wouldn't just be speech. It wouldn't just be depends on the context. I'd be out on my ass. But they could actually sympathize with Hamas at the place where I graduated. I mean, it's truly mind-blowing. It's literally, you realize they've fallen far, but I don't think people fully understand just how far they've actually fallen. You've actually taken steps going, the next steps into this investigation on the anti-Semitism on college campuses. What are the next steps? Because, the hearing was probably enough. The views you talk about, everyone sees how broken, how corrupted, these, formerly great institutions. Like when people are like, where'd you go to school? It used to be proud to say I went to Penn. It meant something. Like now it's like, if you can check a couple boxes, you'll probably get in. Whether you can read or not is probably irrelevant, and they'll get you through one way or the other. What are the next steps in that investigation to make sure this doesn't happen? Because again, it's not just those 3 schools. That's just a small sample set of probably what's happening on, I would imagine, everywhere but like Liberty and Hillsdale, in all fairness.
And we saw last week, Don, we had students from schools, not just MIT, Harvard, and Penn, which were the 3 university presidents at that hearing. We had students from a number of additional schools, whether it was Tulane, Stanford, Berkeley, and they all talked about just the failures of their leadership and this rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses. So hearing that student perspective is important. But what are the important steps? Number one, I think we need to deliver transparency and accountability on those 3 universities because of that failed testimony. So what we saw from Harvard is we requested documents. They failed to produce them. For the first time ever, Congress issued a subpoena against a college or university because of their failure to turn over the documents. And there is a sense of entitlement. There is a sense of they get to live by a different set of rules. And the reality is U.S. taxpayer dollars give nearly $1 billion to Harvard, Penn, and MIT, each individually every single year, let alone the tax provisions regarding their nonprofit status. And these are schools with tens of billions of dollars of endowment. So there's a lot to this, and it's not just the investigation of what's going on in relation to that hearing, but it's going after the offices of DEI as well, which we've seen at each of these schools. The DEI offices, it is a rot, a moral rot, and it is inherently anti-Semitic. In the case of Harvard, which again, I know the details in depth because many of my fellow alumni have shared that information with me. Hundreds of Jewish students reached out to the Office of DEI. This is before the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack against Israel. And there was not even a single response from the Office of DEI. So now you're seeing a class action against Harvard. And that's going to be the case, I believe, for these other schools as well. When you have students who are unsafe on college campuses, who have been physically assaulted, verbally harassed incessantly, and yet the administration doesn't know that each of these university administrations fails to protect these students. So there is a lot here in the investigation. And then legislatively, making sure that the U.S. taxpayer dollars, we should not be propping up these institutions. The U.S. taxpayers don't support that. The other piece that's important is the foreign dollars. There needs to be greater transparency regarding foreign money going into, for example, Middle Eastern studies programs with conditions regarding teaching anti-Israel curricula or the type of professors that are hired. So there is a lot to this. It is a long-term investigation that is more important than the hearing itself.
So, I don't want to pick on you a little bit too much because it's your alma mater. I get it. But didn't Harvard, I read some article, like some guy who was an African-American professor at Harvard was like tasked to like find out like just how bad the racism and all, and he found out it actually wasn't. I don't remember what the case was, but maybe it was about police brutality or something like that. And they fired him. Like he did the research. It was academic. They just didn't like the results. So they literally, maybe his name was like Roland Fryer or something like that. I was reading it the other day and I was like, I forgot all about it. But like, so you have an African-American who's a professor at Harvard who does this research study that I seemingly like asked him to do, and like, don't trust the science because we didn't like the results. So they fire the guy. I mean, isn't that like, it's South Park level insanity from, an institution that we held in high regard for so long, probably much higher than we should have, including you and I.
And that's why it's so disingenuous when they stood at that hearing and each of them said, oh, we stand up for freedom of speech. They cancel conservatives every single day. In the case of Penn and Harvard, they are second to the last and last. Penn is second to the last when it comes to protections of freedom of speech. Harvard is dead last. I myself was canceled by Harvard after January 6th because they didn't like my floor speech when I stood up for the Constitution and the American people in my district. I was removed from a previously, quote unquote, bipartisan board at the Harvard Institute of Politics, which is now Now, they don't allow any Trump supporters to serve on that board. You only have to, have the status quo groupthink of the left and the never Trumpers to serve on that board. So I wear it as a badge of honor. But the fact that these schools stood up and said, we protect freedom of speech, we know that conservatives are canceled every single day on those college campuses. And the example you just raised, Don, was, yes, it was an economic study. And because they didn't like the outcome, the results showed by the data, they removed this professor. It was an African-American professor who studied law enforcement and found that it did not have racist tendencies the way the left would like to push that on you. So it didn't follow the left's narrative, and he was removed from his professorship. Meanwhile, you have Claudine Gay, the former president who had the abysmal testimony, who plagiarized over 20 times. She still gets her $900,000 salary from Harvard. So
she was I read she was an academic. I guess she did like some sort of one of the studies, whether it's gender studies or African American studies, but like sort of one of these created. They weren't things you could get a degree in when we graduated from college, right? It was like, that's like a new woke thing. And it's like, well, any other professor would be fired. Any student that actually did these things would lose their degree. They'd be thrown out of school in an instant. There's like numerous examples of students that plagiarized far less. I guess for her, it was like in over half of the actual papers she ever did. And she didn't do that many papers relative to I guess, what was it, Larry Summers or whoever was the president before her? I mean, he did in one summer what she did in her entire, academic career. But none of that matters anymore because she checked a couple boxes for them and therefore was beyond reproach. And that seems really scary because, these are the people that are teaching our kids. These are the people that are creating the next generation. You're the exception. But of course, they threw you off the bipartisan board. They just want robots that regurgitate the narrative. And I guess that's enough to get you through Harvard.
And you know what? That was epitomized at the hearing when they literally verbatim answered the question the same exact way. It depends on the context. They were all prepped by the same attorney. But to me, that, as I said, epitomizes what is happening, the moral rot and the intellectual rot, frankly, at these higher ed institutions. And you're exactly right about what is happening at Harvard. When she was chosen as the university president, it was the shortest selection process. Typically, it is very robust. They look at all the academic publications. You're typically a leader in your academic field. And when you compare it to her predecessors, whether it was Drew Faust, whether it was Larry Summers, who is a very preeminent economist, who is a registered Democrat, who was a strong leader. He was university president when I was there. The faculty ran him out because he wouldn't toe the line. And compared to what Claudine Gay said, though, what Larry Summers said, which he talked about how young girls are more likely to play with dolls, whereas boys are more likely to play with trucks and trains. But the context of his speech was he was talking about encouraging women to pursue STEM. Harvard faculty ran him out literally for that. So it shows how far these universities have shifted, yet they're protecting Claudine Gay, who wouldn't condemn calling for the genocide of Jews. So it tells you so much about what's wrong with society today. And to translate that to this November election, that's why I believe that Republicans and specifically President Trump are polling in such a strong position, because people know they can see through this garbage of the radical left.
So this Thursday, Joe Biden's going to address the nation in the State of the Union. You've heard him do a couple. You heard all of my fathers. What do you think he's going to say on Thursday? It feels like every speech he's given has always been divisive. I guess he'll try to bring that back if he can, and the media will try to say it was a great speech for unity. Whatever they can to help him. Let's call it barely stumble through either the speech or this election process. What do you think is going to happen there, and what do you think is going to be the sort of natural response?
Well, we're already seeing from the White House that they are attempting to use this as an opportunity to reset. There is no resetting. The State of the Union is in crisis because of Joe Biden. People feel the crisis day to day, Don. When I talk to constituents in my district, people are struggling with Bidenflation. They're seeing their grocery bills catastrophically high. And when you're on a median family income of about $50,000, which is my district, those increased prices, they are painful. Add that to increased utility bills, increased home heating bills. People are struggling. Also, the number one issue right now is the border crisis. Joe Biden is going to try to pass the buck and blame Congress when everybody knows in this country, except the chattering class in the mainstream media, that the border crisis is a direct result of Joe Biden's executive action that he took in the first days when he was sworn into office. We had the most secure border in modern history, in our nation's history, under President Trump's effective policies, and yet Joe Biden shredded those policies. That's why why we have a border crisis raging, not just along the southern border, but every state's a border state in our country. And we've seen an increase on the border in the northern border as well, including individuals on the terrorist watch list. So even though I'm in way upstate New York, it impacts us, it impacts our community. And in New York City, these great cities are falling apart because of the illegal immigration crisis, because of Joe Biden. People like Lake and Riley, innocent Americans, are losing their lives. And yet Joe Biden has the audacity to try to blame Congress when House Republicans passed a Strong Secure the Border Act. It's offensive to the American people. So the White House is desperately going to try to reset. There is no resetting this failed administration. It is a crisis, and it's a crisis Joe Biden's making.
Yeah, you can't believe your lying eyes, right? I will say, like, listen, I get it. You know, when I see it, and I say this all the time, and I think people, you know, get like, if I go to the store and I'm pissed off, or if I take my kids to McDonald's and I'm like, man, I'm not saying it's changing my habits. I'm not pretending I'm something I'm not. I get it. I'm the son of a billionaire from New York City. Like, but if I have sticker shock, if I see how bad it is, I don't think they can lie their way out of that. They see, you know, criminals being treated with far more regard than American citizens. I feel like people feel they're second-class citizens in their own country, and that's because, hey, New York, well, let's give them $10,000 in cash. They're illegals. They're doing this. They're not contributing anything. They're in hotel rooms for free. We're displacing people. We're taking kids' school gyms away. We're putting them in there. And this is each and every state. You know, we're going to fly them all over. They don't have to have ID. That's fine. That's like, you know, you are a member of Congress sitting. If you didn't have your ID, you're thrown out on your butt. You're not getting on a plane. And yet, it doesn't matter. Who needs it? Like, it's so obvious what they're doing. And yet, yeah, it's Trump's fault. It's truly, the mental gymnastics it takes to get there is truly impressive. But I guess it's not going to stop them.
And that's why it's so offensive when they tried to make Bidenomics. Remember when the White House was focusing on Bidenomics as part of their messaging strategy? That was inherently going to be a failure because Bidenomics itself has been a failure. Yeah. So you're right. You can't convince people of their lying eyes because people understand. And as the White House tries to push and force people to support his agenda, I think they're going to drive people further and further away because people are seeing the impact, whether it's the crime crisis in their community, whether like in New York City, they're seeing $15,000 taxpayer debit cards provided to illegals, yet people are struggling, Americans are struggling to make ends meet. Another case that really highlights this America Last legacy of Joe Biden is you have school children, United States school children in New York who were forced to go home, and the school was used to house illegal immigrants. So the kids are learning online, which is devastating. We know that. And it's all because of Joe Biden's border crisis. So again, people are smart, and that's why you see this in the polling every single day. And on the issue of the border, President Trump leads Joe Biden by over 35 points. On the issue of economy, he is over 22 points. On the issue of national security, he's double digits ahead. On the issue of being able to do the job, he's double digits ahead. So on every metric, President Trump continues to pull in a stronger position than ever before going into the general election.
So, you know what? They'll obviously play their games. The Democrats do that well. They got sort of the free contribution from big tech, from the mainstream media. But, you know, I think if Joe Biden wins at this point, I don't think anyone in America will actually believe it. And rightfully so. I mean, you'd have to be a moron. But, you know, what sort of campaign is Joe Biden going to run? The polling makes it clear that the country's ready to move on from this awfulness. And it's not Joe Biden's policies. I think we got to be very clear. Joe Biden is enacting what Democrats want. They campaigned on doing these things. It's just failed miserably. But it's also different than 2020. They can't, maybe they can, I guess. They can do anything. They can get away with a lot. But they can't just stick him in a basement and pretend, you know, oh, no, we only had 3 people show up to his stump speech because, you know, COVID restrictions. You got to stand in the white circle. It's a little different. If they hide him in the basement now, I think it'll be a lot more obvious. And there's no rational excuse other than he's incompetent.
Well, they're in a very difficult position because the key is, and this is for any campaign, whether it's for president or whether it's for members of Congress, you need to have a candidate where the more the American people or the voters see him, that the numbers go up. You never want to see those numbers go down as they learn more about the candidate. In the case of Joe Biden, the more they put him out there, his numbers continue to slide because he's not able to get through the day. Look at the contrast with the border visits. Joe Biden, his first time ever to the southern border, compare that to the strength that President Trump showed during the border visit. Joe Biden literally didn't not know where he was walking, has never spoken to the head of the Border Patrol. So when they're trying to put him out there, it is failing and it causes his numbers to slide. And I think it's going to be difficult for him to get through this State of the Union, which is an important speech. And President Trump always did an exceptional job knocking it out of the park. But I think physically getting through it, Joe Biden is going to struggle, just like he does getting through every single day or when they put him out on the campaign trail. So I think that we're going to continue to see those poll number slides. And what I'm very focused on as House Republican Conference Chair is making sure that we're not taking the bait from the mainstream media to only talk about issues through the Democratic lens. We are going to go on offense and talk about issues that actually matter to the American people, that are unifying, securing the border, standing up for parents' rights in schools, lowering taxes, lowering these onerous regulations that Joe Biden's put into place, unleashing energy independence, basically the policies that your father put in place that led to economic boom and strong national security around the world. And that's why we have been much more unified, working with President Trump and campaigning as one team as we head to the ballot this November.
So, talk about that a little bit. I mean, obviously you're a congresswoman from, sort of upstate New York, and, that's a little different, right? It's not, that's not Alabama. There's people, it's a lot closer, when you talk about districts in terms of, and yet it feels like you're able to go pretty hard on these issues that is harder. Like, people, the people who watch it, they're like, why can't, it's like, well, you're in a, maybe not you, but there's guys that they're in a Democrat plus 40 district. They magically win. And they're like, they can't go all the way in, or they're going to be out in 2 years. But it feels like, you've been able to go quite hard on some of these issues. Are people, even in places like New York, that are going to be a lot more sort of left leaning, a lot different on these issues? It seems like even they're seeing it because, again, everyone was a sanctuary city until you actually had to deal with the problems that places like Texas has had to deal with for years or whatever. Now that they actually have to deal with it, all of a sudden it's, hey, someone else could be a sanctuary city. We really believe in it, just not here, somewhere else. Let's get it out of here.
So New York is an interesting case study because if you look at when Republicans have picked up seats, there are no other states other than New York and California where we've picked up more seats. And what I think is interesting about that is those are traditionally viewed as blue states. And people see and feel the result of Democrat policies, both at the federal level from Joe Biden, but also at the state and city as well. So you've seen a sea change in New York State in terms of how we've picked up those 4 seats that helped us deliver the House majority. Long Island, which used to be bluer, is now a sea of red in the sense that people are concerned about the crime crisis. They're concerned about the border crisis. And whether it's at the local elections or whether it's those seats that we were able to pick up in the last congressional elections, we flipped those from Democrat to Republican. And I've had an interesting seat given my district. So my district was the swingiest district in the country, Don, from Barack Obama to Donald Trump. And it tells the story of today's Republican Party. My district voted for Barack Obama by 12 points. No, sorry, by more than that, by 15 points. And then it voted for Donald Trump by 12 points. That was the swing in my district. And of course, we flipped it. I flipped it in 2014 from Democrat to Republican. Increasingly, President Trump and today's Republican Party does stronger and stronger in my district. We have flipped every single county legislative seat. We have flipped all the DA seats. We have flipped all the county sheriff seats. Every seat that has been targeted, we have flipped to Republican in my district. We flipped mayor's races where cities that Joe Biden won. We just elected 4 mayors in those key cities because of the crime crisis. And what does that show me? It shows me that your father has grown the Republican Party. President Trump has grown the Republican Party into working class people, hardworking Americans who are the backbone of this economy and have been fundamentally left behind by DC for far too long. So I really have been able to see that firsthand in a way that I think, you're where you come from. And I come from upstate New York. So I've lived this modernization of the Republican Party. And the media often doesn't want to talk about that. They just don't want to understand that President Trump has grown this party, let alone the positive growth we've seen with African-American voters and Hispanic voters as well. So I'm a big believer that Trump on the ballot helps Republicans. I am the voice in Congress that always says it is a net gain to have President Trump on the ballot because he will turn out voters, he will turn out independents, he will turn out people that maybe traditional Republicans have struggled with in years and decades past.
Yeah, I mean, common sense, right? The left does this thing. Like, if you're the left, you're part of the resistance. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, if the resistance is agreeing with corporate America, Hollywood, all of these bastions of power, Wall Street, I'm like, you're probably not actually the resistance, and that's the reality. I mean, hardworking people in upstate New York have been left by the wayside by Democrat policies who've forgotten about them to enrich their, Wall Street, crony capitalists. Like it's pretty amazing. And so they're trying to do that. I think they tried to do that with Joe Biden. That's how he sort of got it's blue collar Joe. I'm like, there's nothing blue collar about a guy that left Scranton, Pennsylvania at like 9, moved to the Beltway basically, and has been a lifelong politician who's frankly never functioned outside of the world of bureaucracy. Like, that's not blue collar. You can say that all you want. Like, I'm more blue collar than Joe. I have worked more blue collar jobs than Joe Biden in my life. And, the left will try to criticize that and make fun of it, but that's the reality. He's not done a single one. But, because he was born in Scranton and he lived there. I think I lived in Pennsylvania, frankly, longer than Joe Biden did in my lifetime because I went to boarding school for 5 years before college. So, like, my 9 years is about the same as his. And I think I actually probably learned something about blue-collar America during my time, living in Pennsylvania and living at the time in Pottstown, one of these sort of, American towns that time forgot, industrial town that was collapsing by the time I got there because of the policies, frankly, of all of Washington, D.C., but a lot of the left that shipped that and those jobs abroad, to save a couple cents on a widget by sending your American dream to China.
Right. And I think when you brought up New York as well, when you see just the weaponization from Tish James or the judge in New York State, hardworking New Yorkers, when we see a crime crisis and failed bail reform, when on one hand you have Alvin Bragg and Tish James who are letting violent criminals and illegals run the streets in New York, commit assaults and violent crimes, targeting law enforcement, assaulting law enforcement, and yet they're spending taxpayer dollars to go after Joe Biden's leading political opponent, Donald Trump. New Yorkers are smart. They can see through that. And that's why I've challenged and I've called out Tish James and the judge for their unethical handling of this case. But people are smart. They understand this is the weaponization of radical prosecutors and of the government because Joe Biden's numbers, he can't win on his policies because his policies have been a crisis and they've just failed the American people. When you talk about relating to constituents, I think about my family. My parents started a small business when I was a kid. I grew up around our family small business. It's a plywood wholesale distribution company. Neither of my parents had the opportunity to graduate from college. They really invested in giving my brother and I greater opportunity. And I was proud to be the first member of my immediate family to graduate from college. And at the time, I was proud to graduate from Harvard, but mostly I'm proud and have stayed a conservative going in and coming out of Harvard and not allowing them to brainwash.
And that's a lot harder. It's like,
that is a lot harder.
It's like sending your kids to school in Hollywood and having them not be trans. Like, it's not easy. It's going to happen. You just gotta fight. So you're a rare exception, Elise. Congratulations.
But think about that compared to what we see with the Biden crime family. You have Hunter Biden, you have Joe Biden's brother, all having a Biden crime family where Joe Biden is the big guy, 10% for the big guy, which Hunter Biden just testified. It is corrupt to the core. So when you talk about what voters are paying attention to across America, they understand that there is Biden corruption to the core, that there's a different set of rules if your last name is Biden or your last name is Clinton, and yet they go after hardworking Americans. And that's why people are standing up in support of President Trump, because they know if the weaponized government can go after President Trump, they can go after anyone, and they have and they will.
I think you're 100% right. I talk about this a lot on the show, but do you actually expect there to be a Biden impeachment vote? Obviously, with Congress, a 1-seat majority, 2-seat majority right now, at the same time, like, knowing what I went through, during the Russia hoax, I'm like, there's never been this amount, like this is fire and they're trying to masquerade it as smoke as opposed to the other way around where maybe this is so flagrant. It's so obvious. If it was me and DJT with the same fact set as Joe Biden, this thing would have been over. We'd have been impeached and I'd have been in Gitmo, 3 years ago. Is anything going to happen with it? Because it's so flagrant. The media will do their thing. Big tech will do their thing. They'll pretend it's a non-issue. The Democrats will do I don't think anyone actually believes it's not a thing, whether they're convenient with the results if you're, on the left. But this is truly an affront on everything that there is about America. We're making trillion-dollar decisions, and maybe they're being based on the fact that the Bidens are themselves compromised. We're blowing everything in China, just every dealing with them. It's like America last, America last. We're about to, never-ending funding for Ukraine and this insanity that they can't articulate a response. Are these decisions that we're bankrolling our future on, that we're going to stuff, trillions more in debt on our children and their grandchildren that they may never be able to overcome? Are they being based on compromise, and we're not doing anything about it? Like, well, it just feels like we're also playing the game differently than the Democrats did.
Well, certainly that is the case because the Democrats think about it was a hoax. Their entire Russia scam was a hoax. Impeachment was a hoax. They shredded the Constitution. And again, it was politically weaponized against Democrats' top opponent, which is Donald Trump. In the case of Joe Biden, I believe we have what is the largest corruption scandal, not just of modern times, but in American politics, that you have the president of the United States who is compromised, whose family has financially benefited illegally, I believe, from foreign adversaries and directly taking communist Chinese money, which went into the Biden's, Jill and Joe Biden's bank account. That was just testified by Hunter Biden under oath. And yet you have the media not asking tough questions and brushing this under the rug. I've been one of the strongest voices in continuing to push this investigation forward. And the reality is, Don, when you're in the House majority and it's so slim, it's the speaker who's going to make the decision when we bring a vote to the floor and corral those votes. But I have been a very strong voice moving towards impeachment. And I think these are clearly impeachable offenses. When you have a president of the United States who has lied incessantly to the American people. Remember when he said he had no involvement whatsoever in Hunter Biden's
I remember them
dealings?
screaming about emoluments with us. Someone bought a cheeseburger. We used to have to account for someone buying a cheeseburger who may have been a foreign national associated with the government, like Trump, at Trump DC. We literally had teams of accountants to account for someone buying a cheeseburger, and we'd have to give that money back to the Treasury. China doesn't give $1 billion investment to a crackhead like Hunter Biden, and that money doesn't just magically appear in Joe's bank account, no one believes that this is real. They're not credible business people. We accounted for cheeseburgers. Right. During the Trump presidency, because they were going to impeach us otherwise. And you have millions of dollars flowing to all of the Bidens, none of whom are international business people, none of whom can explain why they're getting it, all of whom are basically being said, it's buying influence. It's so ridiculous. The grandchildren are on the payroll of China, the great-grandchildren, the ex-girlfriend, the mistress. It's clear to me, everyone has a Biden laptop. Everyone has probably more compromising information about Joe and or Hunter. And it's just it's okay. DC is fine with that result because they control it and they're all in on it. They're all going to get a benefit one day down the road, or they're all on someone else's payroll. It's truly sick.
It is sick and it is flagrant. And again, none of this would have come out if it were not for House Republicans embarking on this impeachment inquiry. And I do think Jamie Comer and Jim Jordan have done a great job moving through this process. And we're going to still follow every fact and make sure that the American people knows this, because the media is not asking these questions. It's House Republicans who are asking these questions to get to the truth. And as I said, I believe this is the greatest corruption scandal. I believe these are impeachable offenses. I've said that for months, so it is nothing new in terms of my position. I've said Joe Biden is compromised, and this is really an issue of national security above all. When you have a president of the United States who is compromised from communist China, who is received as part of this illegal Biden crime family entity where every member of the family has benefited from our adversaries, that is unfit to be president of the United States. And it is a compromise when it comes to national security issues and when it comes to being tough, which this president has not been on communist China, which I believe is one of the greatest threats that we will face, certainly for our generation. And who your father had an incredible record on standing up to adversaries and showing American strength around the world.
Well, I'm actually going to become an artist because I'm told that sons of presidents can sell art at the level of Picasso in terms of price. $500,000 for some finger painting. So I'm going to become a finger painting artist, Elise. It's going to be wonderful. I'm going to make millions. It's totally legit. It's totally legit. Nothing to see here, folks. I'm going to become an artist tomorrow.
Democrat donor with multiple meetings at the White House, and the press says nothing to see here.
It has nothing to do with.
Again, the American people are smart. They see through this. Yeah. They understand that if they, put together art like Hunter Biden, it would not sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, see, I even have some people responding on here that they would buy my art. So I appreciate that, guys. Thank you very much. I do have a feeling, though, that no one in the live chat would be buying my art for $500,000 a piece, outselling legitimately some of the greatest artists in the history of time, for my first finger painting. So, let's make it clear that there's a difference. But, Elise, what do you think, you're out there every day heading some big conferences for the Republicans. What do you think's the most, persuasive message for Republicans to get out this election year? We understand we work against, sometimes it feels like insurmountable, you're up against tech, you're up against mainstream media. It's like, people who aren't just focused in on the reality, who aren't, that political, they're going to get bombarded with that message. Social media, big social is going to make sure you don't see anything, and Instagram will censor you. And, what do you think, though, is going to be the most important getting out there, especially for those Americans who, again, don't follow politics or maybe aren't paying that much attention? How do we make sure they understand exactly what's going on and who's actually at fault for that? What's that message to them?
That message is, and I say this at every event that I do locally. We always say this next election is the most important election in our lifetime, but this one really is. People inherently feel that the country is slipping away from them. And you see the majority of Americans overwhelmingly understand the U.S. is on the wrong track because of Joe Biden's failed policies. But also the data point that I look at that I think is very, very concerning is, for the first time ever in American history, people believe that the next generation is going to be worse off than their parents' generation, and that's fundamentally un-American. So if you want America first policies, vote for President Trump. If you want America last policies, that would be Joe Biden, because Joe Biden has put Americans last, whether it's the border crisis, whether it's failed Biden economics, whether it's his just weakness around the world, which has put our national security at risk, whether it's shredding our energy independence, making us more reliant upon foreign energy, whereas under President Trump, we had energy exports and complete energy independence. On all the issues, President Trump wins. And that resonates with people, Don. I will tell you, people inherently feel the country is slipping away. And they also understand that they're not going to let the media dictate this election. I think previously the media just was so biased that people have tuned that out a bit, and the media is just so egregious day to day. So again, people are tuning that out and really focusing on what is impacting their families. And they see the crime crisis, the border crisis, struggling to pay grocery bills, struggling to pay utility bills. So I think we're going to win on the issues. I think President Trump is continuing to knock it out of the park in terms of his campaign and in terms of talking about the issues that matter, and a stark contrast with Joe Biden, where they have no message. Their message is one of dividing the country. Their message is one of American weakness. Their message is one of America last, and that's not going to resonate in this election.
Well, I really appreciate you being out there fighting this way. Thanks so much for joining us, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Let everyone know where they can find you, by the way, so they can see what you're up to and what you're doing. The comments on here in the live chat are great. So let us know where we can find you, because we need more fighters.
Follow me on Elise Stefanik on all the social media, as well as EliseForCongress.com, and just make sure that you talk to all your friends and family to get them out to vote this November.
Well, really appreciate being here, Elise. Thanks so much. And I'm sure as more of this stuff breaks, we'll be talking to you again soon. So thank you, and I'll speak to you in a little bit. But before we go, guys, what I want to do is, maybe we'll do it at the end of the show, guys. I want to play the entirety of my father's speech today, because, I think it's just an important compare and contrast. So maybe I'll thank the sponsors and then, put that up there so you guys can watch it. I'm also going to do local. So if you're on there and you're going to do the AMA, I'm going to be there taking questions. I think we can do those simultaneously, can't we? Okay. So what I'll do, I definitely want to thank our sponsors. I want to make sure you guys are liking, sharing, subscribing, okay? Because that's a big thing here. It's without you guys, we don't get the message out. So if you're, on Spotify, if you're on iTunes podcast, subscribe there, share it with your friends who that use those platforms. I think that's really important. I see how many people are watching live right here. I see how many likes. They are not the same. I understand there's some trolls on here. I've been watching them with a bunch of nonsense for the last hour and a half. But, it's fine, but they don't have to do it. I know they won't, but like, share, subscribe so other people can see it. So at the end of this, I'll jump to locals, but for those of you who want to see it, I'm going to play my father's whole speech. Listen to everything he said. I actually thought it was a masterclass. It was one of those, he walked out of the room. I was there. I had a meeting with him on something else. And he's like, they didn't even put a podium up. I was like, honestly, that was the best one I think you've done in a while, because it's not curated. It's you from the heart. That matters. People will see that. We used to see probably a lot more of that in 15 and 16 before we had an infrastructure and before all the political people get involved and try to shape everything. And I was like, what? That was real. That was good when he called out Joe Biden sort of directly, like, hey, let's fight this thing one-on-one on the issues. You're not doing that because you can't. I thought it was really important. So right when I'm done with that, I'm going to head over to locals, but I will play that for you guys so you see the whole 15 minutes. I think it's worth the watch. If you're already here, check it out, okay? And don't forget to check out our great sponsors, Go to 1775coffee.com/Don Jr., DONJR, 1775coffee/Don Jr. Get 10% off your first order. Also, guys, get ready and protect yourself against the cancellation from Rumble. Head to friends.rumble.cloud and sign up today for the new Rumble Cloud services. How many businesses do you know that were thrown off of like Amazon Web Services? You saw it with some of the big social companies when there was going to be a push with social media that was conservative. It's like, oh yeah, build your own, and you're canceled and you're cut off. No one's going to go check out the Rumble Cloud services. You're not going to get canceled. You're not going to give big tech that power. You can actually support a company like Rumble who supports free speech. That matters. The other guys say that until you say something that they don't agree with, and then they cancel you and they throw out your business, and you're scrambling to put these things together. So the Rumble Cloud services is going to be a big deal. It's going to be a big blow to tech and Amazon and the other companies that make a shit ton of money doing that kind of business. So pull that away. Friends.rumble.cloud. Sign up. Don't take the chance. You think they're only going after Trump? You haven't been watching. You think they're only willing to go after Trump? You haven't been watching. So check out the sponsors. Like, share, subscribe, download on Spotify as well as iTunes podcasts. And again, before we go, I want to play my father's entire remarks today at Mar-a-Lago. I sort of got there backstage. I almost walked into the room. It was kind of interesting. But it's important that you hear this. Watch it. Give me your thoughts in the comments. I'll come back and check out some of the later comments. I want to hear what you guys have to think. I'm going to play the whole thing and then see what you guys think. But I think it's so important. And I think especially the compare and contrast, you see that off the cuff versus what we get from Joe Biden, like flailing with a teleprompter. And you realize this ain't the same. This is someone that can fix what's going on in our country. So check that one out. Appreciate it, guys.
Well, thank you very much. I want to start by thanking the Supreme Court for its unanimous decision today. It was a very important decision. We're very well crafted, and I think it will go a long way toward bringing our country together, which our country needs. And they worked long, they worked hard, and frankly, they worked very quickly on something that will be spoken about 100 years from now and 200 years from now. Extremely important. Essentially, you cannot take somebody out of a race because an opponent would like to have it that way. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's the leading candidate, whether it was the leading candidate or a candidate that was well down on the totem pole. You cannot take somebody out of a race. The voters can take the person out of the race very quickly, but a court shouldn't be doing that, and the Supreme Court saw that very well. And I really do believe that will be a unifying factor, because while most states were thrilled to have me, there were some that didn't, and they didn't want that for political reasons. They didn't want that because of poll numbers, because the poll numbers are very good. We're beating President Biden in almost every poll. New York Times came out yesterday with a very big poll for us. So they didn't like that, and you can't do that. You can't do what they tried to do. And hopefully Colorado, as an example, will unify. I know there's tremendous support. They brought our support up very strong in Colorado, because people in Colorado thought that was a terrible thing that they did. And while we're on the subject, and another thing that will be coming up very soon will be immunity for a president, and not immunity for me, but for any president. If a president doesn't have full immunity, you really don't have a president, because nobody that is serving in that office will have the courage to make, in many cases, what would be the right decision, or it could be the wrong decision. It could be, in some cases, the wrong decision, but they have to make decisions, and they have to make them free of all terror that can be rained upon them when they leave office, or even before they leave office. And some decisions are very tough. I can tell you that as a president, that some decisions to make are very tough. I took out ISIS, and I took out some very big people from the standpoint of a different part of the world. Two of the leading terrorists, probably the two leading terrorists ever that we've ever seen in this world. And those are big decisions. I don't want to be prosecuted for it. Another president wouldn't want to be prosecuted for it. It had a tremendously positive impact. It stopped everything cold. And sometimes you have to make, they were tough decisions. Sometimes you have to make decisions like that. When you make a decision, you don't want to have your opposing party or opponent or even somebody that just thinks you're wrong bring a criminal suit against you or any kind of a suit when you leave office. I have that right now at a level that nobody's ever seen before. I have rogue prosecutors and I have rogue judges. I have judges that are out of control. And it's a very unfair thing for me, but serving perhaps as a sample to others of what should not be happening. When you make good decisions, and in my case, the economy was great. We didn't go into any wars. We totally defeated ISIS. We provided the largest tax cuts in history. We provided the largest regulation cuts in history. But think of it, no wars. We beat ISIS 100% of the caliphate. And there were no wars. We did a job that was great, but maybe I wouldn't have done that. The caliphate, defeating them, was very powerful. It was going to take 4 years. It took me 4 months. But it was a very strong dictum that I gave. I said, get them, defeat them, end it. We were fighting for 20 years against ISIS, and we did it very quickly. I don't want to be prosecuted. In that case, it worked out very well. There will be some things that perhaps don't work out so well, but I don't want to be prosecuted because I decided to do something that is very much for the good of the country and actually for the good of the world. A president shouldn't have that on his mind, and he has to have a free and clear mind when he makes very big decisions. Or it's going to be nothing more than a ceremonial post. You'll be president, it'll be a wonderful thing, and you won't do anything because you don't want to be hit by your opponent or hit by somebody else, because who wants to leave office and go through what I've gone through? I'm being prosecuted by Biden, my opponent, because every one of these things, whether it's Fannie Willis or Bragg, these are local and state, but they're in total coordination with the White House. You can't do that. It shouldn't be done. I mean, a thing like that. In the case of the DA's office, they put one of the top people, maybe the second person, in the Manhattan DA's office to get Trump. They had a Hillary Clinton lawyer leave the law firm, very prestigious big law firm, leave the law firm to go into the DA's office to get Trump, Pomerantz, Mr. Pomerantz. So he goes in to become a prosecutor, worked for the Democrat Party and Hillary Clinton, goes in to prosecute Donald Trump at a local level, in total coordination with the Department of Justice, meaning Biden. And then you have the Fannie Willis, or as she would say, Fani, F-A-N-I, but Fani. And she hired somebody, knew the person long before this horrible prosecution took place. And she went out and she paid him an unbelievable amount of money, more money than he ever had dreamt possible. Much more money than other people that do that for a living. He never did it at all, had no experience in it at all. And they had obviously a conflict. We don't have to go into that, but they were able to get a lot of money because it was a high-profile person. Me, I'm a very high-profile person. So they were able to pay him close to $1 million when he was not equipped to do the job, and she's not equipped to do the job, and that case should end immediately. That case is so conflicted, nobody's ever seen anything like it. And then you have deranged Jack Smith, who's a Trump hater and represents all the Trump haters, and he's going wild. He's just a wild man. He's been overturned unanimously by the Supreme Court. Went after other people over the years. He's had great failure, but he's mean, he's nasty, he's unfair, and the judges on these cases, they're all Trump haters, other than we have maybe one or two that I think can be fair. But you look at New York, what's happened. I mean, these people have tremendous hatred. You can't do this to a president. And again, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about in the future. A president has to be free. A president has to be, if the president does a good job, I did. Some people would say a great job. But if the president does a good job, a president should be free and clear and frankly celebrated for having done a good job. Not indicted 4 times, and not gone after on a civil basis and not demanded to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in fines on something that was absolutely perfect, where there were no victims, where the financial statements were absolutely flawless, where you have disclaimer clauses. I mean, nobody's ever had a thing like this. I wasn't given a jury, and I had a clubhouse judge just come up with this number on a perfect loan and very conservative financial statements. But even at that, if you look, the disclaimer says don't rely on the financial statements in any way, shape, or form. Go out and do your own work. The bank in question had the most sophisticated lawyers in the world, frankly, one of the top law firms anywhere in the country, and they can defend themselves. What guys like Bragg and Letitia James and Fani and deranged Jack Smith, what they should be doing is fighting violent crime. And that would lead me to the end. I will say that President Biden, number one, stop weaponization. Fight your fight yourself. Don't use prosecutors and judges to go after your opponent, to try and damage your opponent so you can win an election. Our country is much bigger than that. The other thing I say to President Biden, close the borders now. This is not sustainable for our country. It's not sustainable for our cities. Our country is under siege. This is a violent thing that you've done. And many people are dying. Many, many people are dying. They die on the trip up. They die going through the border. And they die in our country. But many of the people coming up are from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums. Many are terrorists. You see it. Many, many are terrorists. And I believe the real number that we have right now is probably closer to 15 million people. And by the time the term ends, I believe the president's term ends, I believe you'll be at close to 20 million people. That's almost larger than any state in the union. Our country, it is not sustainable. Many of these people are tough. Many of these people are bad. They come from some of the roughest countries in the world and some of the roughest prisons. We have prisons in the Congo, in Africa, coming. We have people coming from all parts of the Middle East. They're coming from Yemen, and yet you are bombing Yemen. You have to stop. You have to close the border. You have absolute authorization. You don't need Congress. I had the safest border in the history of our country. And I didn't use Congress for it. And then I built hundreds of miles of wall. And the reason I built it and how I built it was I considered it an invasion of our country. And I took the money from the military. And the Army Corps of Engineers did it with me. And we did a great job. And we had the safest border we've ever had. And now we have the most unsafe border anywhere in the world at any time. There's never been a border like this at any country, anywhere in the world. They would have fought with sticks and stones to stop the horrible situation that's occurring. Our people can't stand it, and the people coming in really can't stand it because they're dying. Many are dying on the trip up, and they're dying in the country. And also, many of the people are criminals, and they're doing tremendous harm. I call it migrant crime. It's migrant crime. It's a new category of crime. They're hurting our country horribly. And we've become a laughing stock all over the world. So I say respectfully to President Biden, you have the authorization right now. I did it. I didn't go to Congress and say, do I have the right to close? I fought Congress on it. Close the borders. You can do it right now. You have everything. Use my policies. My policies were great. Everybody said it. Use my policies. So just to finish, I have great respect for the Supreme Court. And I want to just thank them for working so quickly and so diligently and so brilliantly. And again, this is a unifying factor. Everybody now is together, and they can go after me as a politician. They can go after me with votes, but they're not going to go after me with that kind of lawsuit that takes somebody out of a race who's leading in this case, but even if the person wasn't leading. And I want to thank you all for being here. Do we have any questions? Yes.